According to William McKinley, who was the President of the United States at the time of the Spanish-American War, which is what we're talking about today, Cuba ought to be free and independent, and the government should be turned over to the Cuban people. So Cuba was fighting for its independence at this time, and because of the wars that it was facing, it was one of the causes that brought America into the Spanish-American War. And according to Russell Alger, the U.S. Secretary of War during the presidential administration of William McKinley, he said the conservative and responsible men at the head of the nation's affairs were profoundly averse to war, so they were against the war, although they encountered, and holding to this course, the growing opposition of public sentiment throughout the country. So towards the beginning of this time, the people who were at the head of the United States did not want to get into war. They wanted to stay out of it. But as causes happened that we're going to discuss some in the speech today, more and more U.S. citizens pushed for war, and they eventually joined the war. So in this speech, we're going to chronologically explain the events and overview of the Spanish-American War from the causes of the war to the results of the war. So my first point is the causes of the war. So I have a few of them here. So America's relationship with Cuba, more specifically its trade relationship with Cuba, was a cause of the war because as Cuba was fighting for its independence, it was facing many battles and many war tactics were being used against it, like scorched earth policy, which is when goods or materials are being burned as in an attempt to not let the enemy have access to them. So these materials that were being burned was also some of the things that are being traded with America. So these trade relations was sort of broken and the U.S. economy was damaged. Another cause of the war is the Delome letter. So the Delome letter was written by a man named Enrique Dupuy Delome, and he was the Spanish ambassador to the United States at the time. And he wrote this letter calling President William McKinley weak and bitter for the affections of the people. This angered the United States citizens because their president was just called weak, and they didn't want their country to be looked upon as weak as well. Another cause of the war was the sinking of the USS Maine. So the USS Maine was a battleship that was sent from America to Cuba in an attempt to protect the American citizens that were in Cuba at the time from the fighting that was going on over there. And according to History.com, the sinking of the USS Maine killed 266 of the 400 American crew members that were on board. So when this USS Maine sank, many Americans believed that the Spanish sunk the ship as an act of war. And while the Spanish argued that it was caused by a malfunction on the ship, America strongly believed that Spain had it out for them and wanted to go into war with them. And another cause of the war would be yellow journalism. Yellow journalism is a strategy of writing where you purposely over-exaggerate things in order to sell more copies or make it more interesting to read. And in fact, yellow journalism was a term that was credited to be invented by William Hearst, who was the owner of the New York Journal, and Joseph Pulitzer, who was the owner of the New York World, who were both competing newspaper companies at the time. So we actually have a newspaper here today to represent yellow journalism and how it was used in many newspaper articles of the time. And according to the Office of the Historian, William Hearst once said, "You supply the story, I'll supply the war." So even if Spain wasn't trying to have violent relationships with America, Hearst and other newspaper companies that used yellow journalism would make it seem like they did through exaggeration. And the Spanish-American War began on April 25th, 1898, which brings me to my second point, the events of the Spanish-American War. So the first battle of the Spanish-American War was the Battle of Manila Bay, which occurred on May 1st, 1898. And in this battle, there were Spanish ships in the Philippines, and the United States sent their fleet over to the Philippines and attacked the fleet that was over, the Spanish fleet. And according to Encyclopedia Britannica, in the Battle of Manila Bay, only 9 U.S. troops were wounded and 0 of their ships were lost. But on the Spanish side, 381 troops were wounded or killed, and all 7 of their warships were lost. So the America obviously did better and won that battle. Other battles of the war include the Battle of El Caney and San Juan Hill, which were major turning points of the war because they allowed the United States to capture Santiago, Chile, which was also a place that Cuba was fighting with in order to gain their independence. So not only did these two wars help America in the Spanish-American War, but also helped Cuba in its fight for independence. And a truce was signed on August 12th between America and Spain that officially ended all violent or war relations between the two. And according to the Hispanic Division of the Library of Congress, the signing of the Treaty of Paris on December 10th, 1898 officially ended the Spanish-American War. Which brings me into my third point, the results of the Spanish-American War. So the treaty, according to Khan Academy, the Treaty of Paris gave the United States possession over Guam, Philippines, and Puerto Rico, and the United States emerged as a world power, and the reputation of the U.S. Navy became more powerful. So before the war, the United States Navy was ranked maybe 5th or 6th in the world, but after the war, it became ranked as 2nd in the world. So in conclusion, the reputation of the United States and the reputation of the United States Navy have been improved through this war, and the U.S. was seen as a world power. So as the United States faced battles like the Battle of Manila Bay, the Battle of El Caney, and the Battle of San Juan Hill, they helped prove themselves after going through things like the sinking of the USS Maine, the Loeb Letter, and yellow journalism. Not only was the reputation of the United States improved through this war, but Cuba also won its independence. So even though this war isn't as well known as other wars in American history, it helped transform America's reputation into what it is today. Thank you.